Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast, the store where social outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all-around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the Nerdy Occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, everybody.
And I am your host, /Time Low Wannabe, the brains from pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
Inexplicably tired all of a sudden, which annoys me, but apart from that, I'm fine.
Okay. Well, give me one moment to get our thing up and running. But yeah, no, I'm doing well as well. Nothing eventful really has happened. I've just been chilling. Okay. Go. There we go. So this is from NBCNews.com. Toxic Masculinity, Andrew Tate, and the Online Manosphere inspired Netflix's Adolescence by Angela Yang.
For those that don't know what adolescence is, it's basically 2025's equivalent of 13 Reasons Why. And as per usual, it's peddling the narrative that young men are so very vulnerable to being radicalized and toxic because dark logic. It's allegedly based on several instances, although it bears very little, if any, resemblance to those instances, though you wouldn't know it from how the UK government is reacting, because they're basically planning legislation and school curriculums around the thing, which we will get into as we go. Moving on.
Subheader of the series, which rose to the top of the streaming service's most watched show list, follows the fallout after a teenage boy is arrested for murdering his female classmate.
And rather than attribute this to anything like personal trauma, mental health issues,
or sociopathy or whatever.
Rather than attribute this to, the character being a human being with feelings and crap, like that I would actually be on board for. If they had essentially pulled the Joker, we would not be criticizing the thing. We would in fact be lauding the thing. But instead, they blame online culture, the culture wars, toxic masculinity, etc., etc. ad nauseum. We'll get into it as we go. Moving on.
Alright, Netflix's newest hit show, Adolescent, wastes no time revealing to viewers that the 13-year-old boy arrested in its dramatic opening did in fact stab his classmate to death. I feel like I've seen there's either been like other series or movies or something that have done this exact same thing.
It's very, very derivative. I'm not kidding when I said this is basically 2025's answer to 13 Reasons Why. It's essentially that with even more batshit crazy identity politics nonsense and the stabbing crisis that is currently happening in the UK as the backdrop instead of a suicide, basically. The only thing that's particularly changed about adolescence as compared to 13 Reasons Why is because the political situation it's commenting on has gotten more radical. It has gotten more radical in turn, and because the art school set have gotten even less meritocratic over the course of the last 10 years or so, the shot composition and shit is even more basic bitch and stupid than it was. Like, 13 Reasons Why was kind of malicious at times, but it it felt like it was at least coming from a well-crafted place, if not necessarily a sensible one. This one doubles down on the things that I disliked about 13 Reasons Why and several other people disliked about 13 Reasons Why, and turns them all up to an 11, while turning down any sort of talent or merit therein contained. Moving on.
What proves to be far more complicated are the efforts by the adults in his life to understand why he did it, a mystery that forces them to confront the origins of a teenage boy's tangled feelings about women.
Okay. One, the second half of that sentence is bullshit, and we'll get into it later. But, and I'm saying this both inside the universe of the story and outside the universe of the story. Why didn't anyone just think to ask him, like, instead of like deep diving into this psychological woo, you could have just like talked to him like a human, like a person. And that is both my question in universe and out of universe, because this same attitude of we can't actually expect people to understand their own minds better than we can, so we'll have to like retroactively psychoanalyze them thing is a huge part of the problem. Because rather than attribute young boys' problems to the fact that they're human and humans occasionally have problems, it has to be, oh, masculinity is to blame, oh, culture war is to blame, oh, politics we don't like are to blame, etc., ad nauseum. Anything and everything except treating a human being like they're a human being and displaying some level of understanding of human emotions or human motivations ever. This boys are kamikazes in waiting thing is both evil and stupid simultaneously. It is equally evil and stupid simultaneously. Moving
on. What proves to be far more complicated are the efforts by the adults in his life to understand why he did it.
You just said that.
Oh, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to move it down. Within a week of its debut, Adolescence became Netflix's top charting TV show, with critics and viewers lauding it as a critique on social media-based toxic masculinity and its role in the teenage experience. Hold on.
Yep.
Hold on. Let me. There's one more sentence. Let me just read that.
Okay, go ahead.
It's one of the first scripted projects to confront the rising cultural influence of the manosphere, a network of online spaces that promote rigid notions of masculinity and espouse misogynistic stereotypes about women. Okay.
They don't. Okay. There are several different factions within the broader manosphere. One of them is pickup artists. The second is MGTOW. And the third is men's rights advocacy. In all three cases, there is no misogyny anywhere to be found. You just attribute being critical of individual women's behavior, or even women in general's behavior, as being hateful or fearful of them because you can't conceive of criticizing women ever having merits of any kind, ever. Like, PUAs explicitly do not hate women because the entire premise of pickup artists is women are great and we want to earn their attention. Granted, that doesn't always go well because you have people who are bitter, broken people who can't be reliant on the system to fix anything, and they take the wrong lesson from it. Like, for example, it used to be the case that the pickup artist to end all pickup artists was Roosh V. He was essentially the like pickup artist, full stop. He has since moved on because he's kind of become a born again Christian type traditionalist type. Doesn't really matter. he basically stopped being relevant to anything after he stopped being a PUA, and his mantle was picked up by people like Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is a moron to a dangerous and childish degree, and as such, bumblefucks his way into committing illegal acts, usually without even realizing he's doing it, even though he's also so stupid that he frequently will just admit to doing things that are illegal without realizing that is what he is doing. But even he does not do what he does out of a hatred for women. He does what he does because it is, at least in some cases, effective. Like, people criticize him for doing this thing called the lover boy method, where he will seduce a woman and then basically convince her to be a cam girl for him and make him money. But here's the thing. The lover boy method wouldn't work for someone who can't get female attention. So the only reason Andrew Tate is the way Andrew Tate is because it is effective. But as with Andrew Tate, the same with Roosh V, pickup artistry is based on the premise of women are awesome and we don't know how to engage with them, so let's learn how to engage with them to earn their affection and attention, and yes, sex and romance and all the rest of it. But that is not a hatred of women. MGTOWs, on the other hand, are the group is referred to as men going their own way. These people are people who equally are infatuated with or want to have relationships with women, but they've been burned so many times, or they view the relationships between men and women in the modern day as being so toxic, they just opt out. That's the going their own way part. And men's rights advocates do not hate women either. In fact, many of the most prominent men's rights advocates, like the Honey Badgers, like the Dadvocate, like the Prim Reaper, etc. A lot of prominent men's rights advocates are women. They're just anti-feminist women, or anti-traditionalist women, or both. Because, funnily enough, especially the modern day rendition of traditionalism is so gynocentric that it might as well be referred to as gyneolatry. The sycophantic, simpering worship of women in a lot of cases with traditionalism, and of course with intersectional feminism. But here's the thing. The thing that the establishment needs to understand above anything else: feminism and gynocentrism are not women. And criticizing individual women or even groups of women does not denote a hatred or fear of women. It denotes a skepticism of women, probably at most, or frankly, a worshipful idealization of women in most cases, probably. Misogyny is a rare mental condition, specifically because human beings of all genders are raised primarily by their mothers first. A person's mother is their first example of what it means to be a human being. So, unless they have an immeasurably abusive or toxic relationship with their mother, not even the staunchest of gay men is a misogynist. Not even the staunchest of traditionalists is a misogynist. Because, quite frankly, human beings are, as a species, extremely gynocentric. Funny story about this, actually, and this will be the last thing I get into before we move on. There have been studies of what's known as in-group preference and out-group preference among the genders, and I'm going to bury the lead slightly by pointing out the two sort of intuitive things that might be true. If I were to ask you what is the relationship between men in general and women in general, you might tell me they might both have a in-group preference because of gendered solidarity, or they might both have an out-group preference because of mate selection. But in actuality, what happens is women have an in-group preference. Women would rather hang out with other women. But men actually have an out-group preference. Men in general would also generally prefer to be around women than to be around other men. And as a result of this, you will note that if both genders have a preference to be around women, not even men want to be around men, apparently. At least not according to this data. And that is why, when you even bring up the concept of men's rights or men's vulnerabilities or men's issues, apparently the establishment rule is we need to find a way to blame them for this or their masculinity for this to get them to decry and disassociate from their masculinity, because their masculinity is the problem. Anyway, moving forward.
Alright. The story centers on Jamie, played by Owen Cooper, whose murder of his classmate Katie sends shockwaves through their English suburb. Each episode is shot in one continuous take and focuses on a different aspect of the fallout.
Okay, so about this one take nonsense, it really cripples the actual aesthetics of the show, and I'm fairly certain it was done just to be pretentious, just to prove, look at me, I can do long takes. And it really is as insufferably hipstery as I'm making it sound, because it's not a visually or aesthetically pleasing way to view a setting, ever, like at all. And it ruins the actual flow of the story, because the reason why things are presented in, montage form of cuts being interplaced with other cuts is because that's actually how our brain prefers to process information presented in this type of visual form. And the long takes just tend to make you bored or sleepy, frankly, unless they're focusing on something very particular, and most of the time it's just focusing on what would have been cut out in a setting where multiple cuts were allowed. And I realize I'm being rather harsh there against the formatting, but like I say, when something is done just to go, look at me, look how artsy I can be, and it actively hampers the presentation of the information, I'm sorry, but your hipster idiocy has shot you in the foot. Moving on.
Alright, series co-creator and co-writer Stephen Graham, who also plays Jamie's dad, Eddie, said the goal was to engage people in different questions. Questions like, what's going on within our teenage boys? He told Netflix's publication Tudum, I think. In our heads, Jamie did do it. Co-writer and co-creator Jack Thorne told NBC News, what we set out to do was not tell a whodunit, but a why done it. We wanted to get inside Jamie, and we wanted to present this complicated portrait. And by establishing his guilt at the end of episode 1, that gave us longer to do that.
And this is precisely why this fucking thing is insufferable. Because you went looking for dozens upon dozens of whys. And one, the whys you gave us make no fucking sense, because the ideology that gives rise to those whys make no fucking sense. And two, it completely and utterly divorces the audience from Jamie as an individual or as a character. This is why Joker is such a better example of how to do this thing you're trying to do and do it actually correctly. 2019's Joker actually does give a full and well-rounded approach to Arthur Fleck as a character. This show, however, basically just spends 4 episodes demonizing this kid, and not even effectively doing that, because in an effort to demonize this kid, they actually showed the murdered girl being a bully to him, and we as the audience are still supposed to dislike the way it ends up. Which, I mean, it's easy to do. It's very easy to make this person went on a stabbing rampage a bad thing. But simultaneously, it's basically just giving the academic excuses for this kind of behavior instead of actually trying to understand the behavior. Which, again, to compare it with Joker saw things through like 5 or 6 different valid lenses and interwove them all. And that's why 2019's Joker is still a classic movie. And this one probably won't be remembered by next year, unless the British government continues to make policy based on it, which, being as the British government is fucked in the head right now, I have no doubt they probably will. But the point being, you set out to make this show a show about the whys, whys as in W-A-Y-S, not wise as in W-I-S-E, but you set out to make this show about the whys, when all you really did was do a hit piece on this character that is the main character of your story. You didn't actually see it from his perspective. You didn't actually bother to understand the personal reasons he might have had for doing this thing. You basically just went, here is the academic propaganda for why toxic masculinity impacts boys in this way. And no further analysis was done. And I can tell because almost no one actually asked Jamie at any point during the proceedings here why he did it. Or if they ask him why he did it, when he tells them why he thinks he did it, we get the psychologist going, no, he didn't actually, we shouldn't actually take his word for any of this. Here is the academic and psychological excuse for this thing that we aren't going to see the sympathetic side of because we can't view men as victims or people with issues or people in need of help. We have to see them as entirely culpable for everything they do, even when they psychologically snap. Moving on.
Okay. Over 4 episodes, Adolescence explores themes of gender, misogyny, violence, and extremism, and how the manosphere can influence online and offline behaviors, particularly in young men. Often in these online spaces, boys and men share messages around alpha male and incel culture.
Okay, but here's the thing. You spend this entire 4-episode miniseries bitching and whining and moaning and fear-mongering about the manosphere, but no one even proceeds to think that this intersectional feminist academia bullshit that has corrupted everything from psychology to the arts is ever culpable for any of this. Even though the victim of Jamie's violence was explicitly a bully of his. She explicitly basically did everything she could to virgin shame him. And also keep in mind that the characters in this particular miniseries are young teenagers. Like, Jamie is like 13. And yet, the victim of his stabbing crime was shaming him for being a virgin at 13. Like, everyone and their dog has pointed this out already, and I don't particularly think it's very relevant to anything, so I won't belabor the point too much here. But did no one remember that they wrote this kid to be 13? Because if a 13-year-old isn't a virgin, I'm sorry, but that raises more questions than if he were one. But also, why is a kid in his same age bracket of 13 to 15 shaming him for being a virgin when she in universe knows that he's 13? This is what I mean of, you can't just put the academically sanctioned feminist excuses for shit in your script and then leave them there and not, like, do anything with them, because are you trying to tell us that we should be shaming 13-year-olds who haven't had sex at the age of 13? Because most people, frankly, haven't started going through puberty at the age of 13. Anyway, moving on.
The show offers a harrowing look at how young boys can be particularly vulnerable to this kind of messaging. Bernadette Johnston's founder of Safer Lives Online, a nonprofit focused on combating online hate and extremism, said she appreciates that there is no clear villain arc that sent Jamie on a path toward murderous aggression. You can see that he's got a lot more going on than just consuming some misogynistic content online. There's potential male rage issues. There's some narcissism in there, said Johnston, whose research focuses on misogynistic extremism. But then also he's possibly just behaving like a normal teenager as well, because what teenager isn't slightly narcissistic and thinks the world revolves around them? So I think that's what it does really well.
Okay, I'm gonna play a little bit of a game here. If I gender flipped that sentence, and said all teenage girls are at least somewhat narcissistic and misandrist, would this article still be publishable? Because I think we all know that if anyone, in all sincerity, gender flipped this sentence, everyone and their mother would be calling it misogyny. But you get to say that every teenage boy is a quasi-narcissist and angry and misogynistic, all the while forbidding anyone to ever say teenage girls are vapid and narcissistic and maybe even sometimes misandrist. And a similar thing is true with regards to the culture war element of this show as well. Because this show bitches and moans and whines and waxes lyrical about people like Andrew Tate and the Manosphere, but we can't talk about how many institutions have been ideologically and institutionally captured by intersectional feminist social justice bullshit. And no man or boy is allowed to take issue with how many institutions have been ideologically captured by intersectional social justice feminism, but everything in its dog needs to be laid at the feet of the Manosphere, even though the people making this movie had absolutely no understanding of the Manosphere, let alone any knowledge of what the people in the Manosphere actually say. Moving on.
Right. Alright. The show starkly points to one real-life influencer. In the second episode, investigators learned Jamie could have been influenced by the preachings of Andrew Tate, a self-proclaimed misogynist with millions of social media followers. Tate is among the most high-profile personalities in the manosphere, thanks in part to the criminal allegations he and his brother Tristan Tate face in Romania. Authorities there have charged them with rape and human trafficking. They've denied any wrongdoing.
Okay, you guys have the causality completely flipped there. 1. Andrew Tate did not declare himself a misogynist until people started fear-mongering about him being a misogynist. So he tongue-in-cheek said, I'm a misogynist then, because he was already getting demonized for being a quote-unquote misogynist. And secondly, the high-profileness of his legal case did not make him famous. What made his legal case noteworthy was because he was already famous, and the establishment wanted any and all excuses to demonize him. So when they caught wind of his legal troubles and so forth, they put it on blast, because the media loves to take any countercultural manosphere content and demonize it. But this kind of backwards reasoning is exactly the problem here. It can't be these people are popular because something they're saying resonates with people. It can't be these people are popular because parts of what they're saying are at least arguably true. And it can't be young men are drawn to this because there are no other voices in their lives that speak to their male perspective, especially the teenage male perspective. No, 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 no. It has to be he's popular because he brainwashed them, and he's popular because he is evil, rather than being called evil people because people dislike the fact that he's popular. This kind of backwards reasoning happens all throughout adolescence, and it fucking pisses me off because as someone who considers himself and who has a considerable amount of podcasts backing me up on this point, as someone who considers himself a men's rights advocate and a person who regularly talks about men's issues and men's cultural problems and where men fit in modern day society and shit, I can tell you the reasons why young men feel isolated and alone and radicalized is because large swaths of our culture are being occupied by intersectional feminist social justice bullshit from 12 years ago, and it has for at least those 12 years. And you're not allowed to talk about men being vulnerable, let alone being victimized by women. This is as an example. A lot of people, for whatever bullshit reason, only care about men being the victims of rape when it's other men doing it. That's why when you hear feminists talk about men being the victims of sexual assault and shit, the first thing out of their mouths is usually prison rape. Because prison rape is same sex. What that obscures, however, is the staggering amount of people who are victimized by women who happen to be men. This idea that women are always the victims of men's behavior and men are never the victims of women's behavior is part of the problem. And when a boy or a man realizes he's been victimized by a woman, a lot of the time, or at least for the longest time, the issue was no one would believe him because the cultural narrative is so pervasive that women are the victims of sexual assault and men are the perpetrators of sexual assault. To the point that I will bring up a very big example of this. Do you remember the Amber Heard Johnny Depp audio footage? She literally, in that footage, expresses to him, "Go tell the world that you, Johnny Depp, have been assaulted by a woman. No one will believe you." Fortunately, that recording was a recording, and so we have evidence of her abuse, and so much the better. But if you think Johnny Depp is somehow an outlier, I would hate to burst your bubble, but the only difference between Johnny Depp and most other men who are victimized in these kind of relationships is Johnny Depp has the money to go through the court system, and he has the public eye close enough that he can actually make his case. Not to mention that, he documented the evidence in a way that most men probably wouldn't think to do under most circumstances. Because contrary to intersectional feminism, men and women are not, the categories of man and woman are not teams. I just went over the fact that women have an in-group preference, but men actually have an out-group preference thing. Men don't see themselves as an interest group. And frankly, that is the main reason why, or that is one of the factors as to why men's rights advocacy is not taken seriously. Because the intersectional feminists want men's rights to be a misogynistic hate cult. But what it actually is the small percentage of men who actually can get the concept of being victimized rather than the victimizer through their head. Moving on.
Tay's not publicly commented on the show for some who work with young people, the show has become an opportunity to connect with parents and educators. Thomas Michael, who works at a British secondary school in a role that ensures the safety and well-being of children, posted on X in an effort to use the show as a chance to teach adults about the manosphere. He said in an interview that the show should serve as a wake-up call, noting that it's easy for parents to be unaware of what their children consume online.
My dears, here is the entire problem with this. You're only showing the manosphere, quote unquote, the straw. In fact, fuck it. I'm going with the rhetoric and calling it the straw manosphere because fuck you. You're only showing them the feminist straw manosphere. You're not actually engaging with any component of the manosphere. You're not even accurately portraying Andrew Tate. And Andrew Tate is, as I say, he is an idiot who regularly backdoors himself into saying incriminating shit by sheer dint of being an idiot with no self-awareness. But as it happens, the manosphere as it is portrayed in adolescence is not anything resembling the IRL manosphere. And the reasoning behind the IRL manosphere has nothing in common with the feminist examination of it, because feminists or gynocentrists more generally cannot get it through their heads that you can be in favor of men's rights and men's issues being addressed properly, and you can be in favor of men and boys being treated like human beings without hating women. And moreover, another thing that people need to get through their heads: feminism is not women. There are plenty of women who actually are capable of caring about men as human beings and continuing to act as though the manosphere is some misogynistic hate cult is only going to exacerbate the problem, because it morally invalidates boys and men with personal issues in general or involving women specifically. What do you think it does for a man's psyche when he hears about another hashtag Me Too victimization? What do you think it did to? Well, actually, no. I was going to say, what do you think it did to the average man's psyche to watch Johnny Depp go through the same type of shit that quite a lot of men go through? But honestly, I think the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing, for all of its many fuck yous to common sense and decency, actually was a positive thing, because it actually showed people who were unaware that men could be victims too, that men can be victims in general and of women, which is an important thing to do when you consider that most people default to the assumption of men as victimized or women as victimized. So that actually probably did have a positive impact. But what do you think it does to young boys when you attach moral value or moral judgment to the things like incel, toxic fandom, toxic masculinity? Hell, the APA, for God's sake, basically updated their guidelines for treating men and boys with psychological issues by basically framing masculinity, in particular toxic masculinity, quote unquote, as the problem, and that men and boys aren't psychologically healthy unless they disavow their masculinity. Do you think that is helping, or might it just be amplifying the problem 10 times fucking over? And how many different institutions and forms of expression have to be warped in this intersectional feminist way into intersectional feminist diatribes before we realize that if the manosphere is capable of radicalizing young boys, what in the fuck do you think all this feminist crap is doing to young girls? And what do you think that they in turn are doing to young boys, given that intersectional feminism gives them permission to morally invalidate a young boy or a man's worth because they're too addicted to their masculinity, quote unquote? Moving on.
If you got children, they're going to know a lot more than you, said Michael, who has led workshops explaining the manosphere to parents and school staff. Whether they're accessing it, whether they've been taken in by it, it doesn't matter. They're going to be aware of it. Just talk to them about it, be open about it. The main thing is educating yourself and knowing what to look out for. Yeah, most parents aren't going to do that.
Yeah, and I agree with the sentiment you should educate yourself, but you should educate yourself by actually watching the content they're watching, not by listening to some feminist academic's secondhand warped strawman explanation of what they're watching. See, this is the problem. The same thing happened with Gamergate, and the same thing happened with Comicsgate, and the same thing happened with all the other assorted culture wars. Rather than watching the thing that the fear-mongering articles and academic treatises are criticizing, rather than actually going to the source and actually listening to these people for yourselves, you're being told, no, you mustn't go watch their content because that will just give them ad revenue, or that will give them legitimacy, or prove that they're valid or something. You must read the feminist straw man of what those people think. Never mind if they inevitably have nothing to do with what the person actually thinks, because frankly, feminists and traditionalist gynocentrists cannot understand the manosphere, because the manosphere is by and large operating on the premise that men are just as vulnerable to socio-cultural issues as women are. And so many people, especially in academia and in journalism, cannot understand that concept without treating it as though it is morally invalid and spawned from hate. It's literally saying men aren't allowed to have issues or problems in life unless they're morally invalid, and therefore they should be ashamed of themselves for focusing too much on their own issues and not serving other people, which is usually women or girls. Moving on.
Alright. Well, the show offers an unvarnished look at some of the internet's most toxic corners. It also deals with masculine fragility. Thorne said that in researching the manosphere for the show, he was shocked to realize how easily his own teenage self could have been drawn toward incel culture. The term, short for involuntary celibacy, is defined as heterosexual men who blame women in society for the lack of romantic success by the Anti-Defamation League.
Oh god. First, the Anti-Defamation League are hacks, and they barely understand the things they talk about. But that's also neither here nor there. No, the view you get from adolescents of the manosphere is not unvarnished, because to be unvarnished, it would actually go back to primary sources. In every other area of academic study, we understand the idea that in order to actually understand something, you have to go back to the primary sources, rather than people's commentaries on those primary sources. But where manosphere stuff is concerned, you're not told, watch the videos for yourself, draw your own conclusions. You're told, oh, an academic has already done an examination of this thing. Here is what the academic understanding of this thing is. And it's almost always hysterical fear-mongering, because men can't have vulnerabilities in general or to women. They have to be the responsible ones, and therefore the only men who care about their own issues are either dangerous sociopaths or pathetic losers who should be ashamed of themselves for caring about their own issues. That's the thing. It's like, to use another relatively topical example, when Kyle Rittenhouse was put on trial for defending himself against an angry mob, he cried on the witness stand. He cried on the witness stand because he had to take two people's lives, or severely injure one of them and then take the other guy's life. And yet, when he started crying, was the average intersectional feminist type going, good, at least he's in touch with his emotions? Fucking no. Because what they did instead was say, oh, look, he's crying like a baby. What a pathetic little bitch. But if he hadn't cried, if he sat there stoic and stone-faced, without a single tear in his eyes, I guarantee you they would have said something to the effect of, oh, he's not even emotionally reacting to the fact that he killed some people or severely injured some people. He must be a sociopath. That is the thing with men's rights and men's issues. So often, when people address men's rights and men's issues, they are either called pathetic losers for complaining about something to which men are uniquely vulnerable, or they're called dangerous sociopaths for not outwardly reacting in a situation, or they're called dangerous sociopaths for being angry that they're being victimized in this way, that way, and the other way. That typically is the two-step that most gynocentrists or feminists or traditionalists have whenever you bring up how men are or should, like, men are vulnerable in general or to women. It's either you're a dangerous sociopath because you're angry, or you're a pathetic loser because you whine. And in both of those cases, whether you're being framed as a pathetic loser or you're being framed as an angry sociopath, that basically all but dehumanizes the person and completely delegitimizes their issues. And it's in that sense, it's in that context of, if I complain, I'm a pathetic loser. If I get angry, then I'm a dangerous sociopath. That attitude is what makes men or boys feel isolated, and like the world in which they find themselves is basically rigged against them. All the while, intersectional feminists whine and bitch and complain about this imaginary patriarchy from yesteryear, and therefore see men as all-powerful, even when they're vulnerable. So men can't complain, because then they're losers, but men can't get angry either, because then they're dangerous sociopaths. But also, men have to suffer in silence, because if they bring up their issues to anyone, they'll be told, men run the world, suck it up, and take responsibility for your shit. And then when men kill themselves, or others, we blame them for being too weak to cope with that. Moving on.
Okay. The disturbing sort of thing I found was that I understood the attraction of it, and I could particularly put myself in Jamie's shoes. Someone said, I could go to a place where, if I heard 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men, that this world is female-centered, and that these women need to be manipulated. I was shocked that I would understand that, and that logic was as compelling as it was.
Okay, you just strawmanned the shit out of the 80-20 rule, and you strawmanned the shit out of gynocentrism. What the manosphere generally, and I can speak because, again, I am at least I am an actual functioning part of the manosphere after a fashion. The premise of the manosphere is that humans like women in general, either because they are heterosexual and attracted to women, or if they're not heterosexual, because they were raised by their mothers, and therefore their mother is the gold standard of what it means to be human. As a result of this, the only people who can genuinely be claimed to be misogynistic are people who have had their brains systematically broken from early childhood by abusive relationships. And as a result, that is why people say humans like women, or people in general like women so much that women get special treatment, because that's actually, like, demonstrably true. And the only time someone brings that up is usually when they're responding to the claim the world is a patriarchy designed for men to oppress women, when in actuality most men, or women for that matter, want to side with women because they care about them by definition, because human beings are innately gynocentric. It's not a it's not a return to patriarchy that the manosphere is offering. It is typically a refutation of the concept of feminist patriarchy theory that men are offering. And in this context, a lot of the PUA types, and even quite a lot of the MGTOW types, operate on the premise that no matter what a man does, women are the ones who decide who is worthy of passing on their genes by having sex with them. So, therefore, we as men, say the PUAs, have to make ourselves as appealing to women as we possibly can so that they will pick us and let us have sex with them. But because this often results in a bunch of people who are less attractive than they otherwise would be, becoming more attractive than they otherwise would, rather than take responsibility for that as women and say, well, they're trying to please us, so maybe we should, encourage them to try and please us more, women will instead say, if a substandard man tries to improve himself, that is them manipulating us and gaslighting us. So they should be ashamed for trying to appease us, even though that is literally the only option they have. And that's why a bunch of MGTOWs eventually look at the system and go, fuck it, this system is entirely rigged, I'm opting out. Moving on.
I just want to point this out. Dalton's gay. So
Yeah. I am very, very gay. The woman card does not work on me. But like I was saying, I was raised primarily by my mother, and therefore I do like women generally. But I also can do this thing where I treat women like individuals instead of goddesses. And therefore, whether I like an individual woman or a group of women or not is very much dependent on are they decent people? Do they meet the same standards I would hold men to? And or are they in the process of saying stupid shit? And the problem that I get into is because a lot of intersectional feminism is ideologically warped, ahistorically stupid shit. And therefore I oppose feminism, but because feminists seem to think that feminism and women are the same concept, that if I oppose feminism, I must therefore oppose equality, or I must oppose women in general. Never mind that egalitarianism is far more succinctly about equality and doesn't revolve around all this theoretical framework bullshit and this historical oppression of women hypothesis that has not been true for our entire fucking species. And I know that because women are generally physically weaker than men, which evolutionarily tells us that they were usually protected more than men were. Because
Dalton.
the way... Yeah, moving on. Sorry.
Okay. The topic is broached in the third episode when Jamie is pressed by a psychologist about his views of masculinity. He oscillates between earnestness and explosive rage, and by the end of the chilling exchange, it becomes clear that his views are fueled by his belief that he's ugly and unattractive to girls. Thorne said he hopes that the show will generate conversations on the sofa, in classrooms, perhaps even in legislative bodies.
Okay, and again, I am going to play men's advocate here and point out that he is not wrong in that summation, or at the very least, he is not getting that out of his own head. He knows on some kind of paper that he is unattractive because the character who was later his victim bullied him and told him as much over and over and over again. But again, I notice that we're not going to talk about the fact that she explicitly bullied him repeatedly. We're going to blame him for snapping because something toxic masculinity, when instead it might be more productive. And no, this is not fucking victim blaming, because if she had actually been called on this shit, she probably wouldn't have been victimized by him in the first place. instead of attributing everything Jamie did wrong to his definition of masculinity, maybe we should have asked ourselves, well, gee, why are we letting this young girl get away with bullying this guy to the point that he snaps? It's the Arthur Fleck situation again. Are you gonna blame Arthur for all the shit that was inflicted upon him through no fault of his own, at least as far as we see in Joker? Or are you perhaps gonna blame the world in which he finds himself, the ways in which his mental issues were not cared for, and the ways in which people goaded him into snapping? It's the you get what you fucking deserve part of the thing. But instead of doing that, which would actually have been a meaningful contribution to this conversation, no, we can't acknowledge that she bullied him. We can't acknowledge that she explicitly taunted him and told him he was a fugly incel, etc. We can't acknowledge that she mocked his interest in the manosphere by basically demonizing him. And we can't acknowledge that this whole thing started because he tried to ask her out, and she literally laughed in his face. Instead, it must be his unhealthy attachment to his own masculinity that's to blame, for some reason. This is feminist propaganda in a nutshell, and this is why this kind of hysterical moral porn will never do anything positive to people, because all it's doing is telling people to be afraid over and over and over again. Be afraid of men and boys. Be afraid of their vulnerabilities. Be afraid of letting them be around other people, especially women and girls, etc., and so on. But by and large, people already are afraid of men and boys, and it's because they're afraid of them that they don't extend to them the kind of empathy to which we extend women and girls.
Don?
I, as a men's rights advocate, would look at this and say, maybe we should try treating men and boys like human fucking beings instead of time bombs. But feminism will only ever see we need to propagandize them harder so that they hate themselves more, so that they will stop being masculine derp. Moving on.
Okay. The disturbing or Dawn said he hopes. How do we help these kids? How do we help these boys? How do we stop boys harming girls? Instead, those conversations, it takes all of us to have them. And maybe the show asks the question, and maybe then everyone can take these questions and try and find a collective answer.
Okay, couple of things for which I did the repeated facepalm. One, instead of trying to figure out in this like abstract academic way how you can help all boys everywhere forever, you could try, and I know this is radical of me to say, but you could try to treat them like humans and individuals and just fucking ask them what they want. And then when they tell you what they want, don't morally judge them for it. Don't demonize them for it. Don't be hysterically afraid of them for it. Don't call them toxic or evil or lame or losers or incels or toxic and so on. If you really want the answer to how to help men and boys, it's a very simple thing. Ask them what their problems are, actually listen, and then proceed to help them with those problems. And furthermore, one of the things to which men and boys can attribute some of their problems is that second thing you listed there. How do we stop men and boys from harming girls? That right there is part of the problem, because you're not seeing the men and boys as someone to help or to heal for their own sake. You only seem to care about men and boys because men and boys' behavior sometimes inconveniences women and girls. Which, by the way, is part of the problem, because it tells me that you're not seeing men and boys as people who are valuable for their own sake and need to be helped just like any other person. You're seeing them as forever and for always the victimizer rather than the victimized, and you're seeing them in relation to their relationship with women and nothing the fuck else. That attitude of men have all the power, so they have to be responsible for how they use it, and women are always vulnerable, so they don't have to be accountable for anything, that is the problem. And it's this pervasive attitude of men are responsible for their actions no matter what they do, and
Dalton,
women are not responsible for anything no matter what they do, is the fucking problem.
you repeated that like 5 times.
I know. I have a lot of built up rage that needs to have an outlet somewhere. And I'm not wording this as perfectly as I could because, like I said, I'm tired, but hopefully someone somewhere will be bettered by my railing at that. Next.
Alright, give me just 1 sec. Okay, share screen. Still keeping on this because Dalton loves to torture me.
They're using it
.com.
Yeah. They're using it to pass laws. This is a big freaking
Boys
deal.
to get anti-misogyny lessons as TV drama adolescent home. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention Caroline. This is written by Caroline Wheeler, published March 23rd, 2025.
Okay, and just to be perfectly clear, misogyny is not a significant problem because most human beings are not even capable of understanding the concept of misogyny. Misogyny is a pathology born out of usually early childhood abuse. Like I say, no matter how gay I might be, even I have gynocentrism problems because I'm a human fucking being, and almost all human beings who have ever lived ever learn what it is to be a human being from their mothers first and their fathers only secondarily. As Aristotle once said, "Give me the child until he is 7 and I will give you the man." Well, ever since like the dawn of human history as we understand it, the person most responsible for raising children in those first 5 to 7 years is their mothers. Even in ancient societies, what usually happened was mothers would raise their children until the end of their like toddlerhood, around the age of 5, and then only once that period had come to an end would a boy be sent to his father to learn trades or to learn how to hunt or to learn how to gather, etc. Men are typically responsible for teaching boys how to act in the wider world. Mothers are the ones responsible for teaching them how to act on an emotional or domestic level. And like I was saying with the Aristotle quote, do you think those first 5 to 7 years have no impact on the way people behave? Because if you believe that, then you're a moron. But back on point. That's why misogyny is such a rare thing. Because unless you have a very dysfunctional relationship with your maternal parent, you will actually overly idealize them, if anything. But because intersectional feminism needs misogyny to be a thing so that they have an excuse to oppose it, they overemphasize the existence of misogyny because that's the only way they can understand why men think differently from intersectional feminist types or traditionalist types. Moving on.
I don't feel like you're just going to repeat everything you just said.
Because these people are stupid in similar ways, predictably. But that's neither here nor there. Moving on.
Well, No, I would say it is here and there because you pick two articles that are very much similar, and thus just makes you repeat
Like I,
yourself.
like I said, they're actually structuring curriculums and laws about this shit. So it's a big problem, and therefore it requires a disproportionate amount of coverage. Moving on.
Subheader: schools will step up their efforts to counter the toxic online influences of figures such as Andrew Tate and incel culture examined in the hit Netflix show. School children will be given lessons to counter misogyny and the growing appeal of influencers such as Andrew Tate under the government's new relationships, health, and sex education guidance. Okay, well, to be fair, you motherfucker, I don't know who did it, but someone cut out sex ed, and that led to a lot of problems. So,
Which frankly just stuns me. That you guys didn't have like sex ed in school, but that's neither here nor there.
um, the guidance, which will be introduced before the end of the academic year, comes as Sir Keir Starmer revealed that he is watching Netflix adolescents with his two teenagers and supports a campaign for it to be shown in schools.
Okay,
Okay.
now comes the time where I have to go full men's rights advocate here, because what was just described there is frankly disturbing. And to explain how disturbing it was, imagine if just imagine if we gender flipped that paragraph. Imagine we sent little girls in to um, anti-misandry uh, lessons to try and counteract the influence of intersectional feminism. Do you hear how dystopian that sounds? Do you see why attributing young boys' behavior to ignorance and hatred might be demonizing them a little bit? Because here's the thing, it's just like with the everything is fascist set of people. You're taking something that is vanishingly rare, that being misogyny, and treating it as though it is the norm. And what you're doing with that assumption is you are shaming boys for hating women when they don't even hate women to begin with, and making them feel pathologically insecure about themselves. And given that male insecurity is exactly the kind of thing that leads to these sorts of mental breakdowns and the violence that accompanies them, do you think that you are solving this problem by literally intensifying the problem? You Because what's basically happening here is young boys and men are saying, "What are you fucking talking about? I don't hate women. I've never hated women. This makes no fucking sense." And they're being told, "You hate women secretly without even realizing it, and that's why we have to brainwash you to worship women even harder than you already do." Trust me when I say, teenage boys, heterosexual teenage boys, do not need encouragement to worship women harder. Because I don't, like, I'm bi, so I only got the barest little bit of this, but that's not it. But that's neither here nor there. But I can tell you, there are not thirstier motherfuckers on this planet, or more, like, love, lust, obsessed with women on this planet, more than teenage boys. Teenage boys basically worship the ground women walk on, for the most part. Just, just to get, like, positive attention from women. They will jump through whatever hoops they have to. Brainstormer, you were a straight teenage boy at one point. Am I wrong in describing teenage boys in general as thirsty as fuck for women's approval of any kind?
I don't think I'm really someone that can comment on that because I had a very irregular childhood. So,
Well, that I suppose that's. Do you remember seeing other boys your age, like
Again, I did not socialize much given the irregular childhood, dude. So again, the
this is fair, but I can remember when I was in school, and like I say, there are not thirstier motherfuckers on this planet than teenage boys in the midst of going through puberty, where it comes to doing literally anything and everything they can to get female attention.
I don't know. I think if I remember again, honestly, I think I will be honest. Like, could just be my generation, but I honestly think teenage girls are even far more thirstier than teenage boys.
Well, that's another part of the conversation, but we're just barely trying to get them to recognize that women can do things wrong. Let's not break their minds entirely by pointing out that sometimes it's the woman who wants it more than the guy who wants it. But yeah, just for the record, the average heterosexual male in their teenage years is so obsessed with getting approval, romantic and emotional, and yes, sexual validation from women that it's pretty much all they think about from the second their balls drop. Let's be real here. And yet you want to tell this group of people, teenage boys in the process of going through puberty, that they don't think of women highly enough, and that they don't put in enough effort to get positive attention from women, because that's a bit like dumping gasoline on an oil fire, there, my friend. You claim to be fixing a thing when all you're doing is doubling down on what people were doing already. And that's the other dangerous part about all this intersectional feminist gynocentric bullshit. You guys have convinced yourself that the world is literally the exact opposite of the way it actually is. And in so doing, in order to fix the world being the opposite of what it actually is, you are doubling down on the way the world actually is and wondering why that blows up in your face. Because here's the thing. Teenage boys want the approval of teenage girls. This is a fact of life so fundamental I don't even like it's frustrating that I even need to go into this. Teenage boys want the approval of teenage girls. They do. So much so that they will go to whatever means they can to get that approval. That is what results in a bunch of people turning to people like Rushdie and Andrew Tate. It's because, for whatever reason, these boys have figured out that they're not attractive to girls, and they think to themselves, okay, how do I fix this? What they're told from their teachers, their psychologists, their, institutions, etc., is it's wrong to even think about this. You should be ashamed for even thinking about it. And when they try their damnedest to get women's approval by being what they're told women want, the sensitive, emotional, very, very like soulful guy, very often what results from that is women don't actually find that attractive. Because here's the other thing. If you want to blame anyone for how boys and men act in relation to women, you might have to actually start criticizing the way women do things. Because at the end of the day, it is the woman who decides who she will go to bed with, or who she will be in a relationship with, or who she will be in a long-term, like, friend relationship with. And if women generally go for the douchebag or the asshole or the wannabe rapper or the jock or the Chad male or the alpha male type person, if women in general go for that guy more than they go for the like sensitive introvert guy, then the sensitive introvert guy is either going to become very, very disillusioned, or he's going to find his way to the PUA community or the like red pill community, where he will meet guys who are telling him, the things they told you women want isn't actually what they want. They want a hyper-masculine, extremely physically fit, bro of a guy who will be a little bit douchey to them and therefore will be more of a challenge for them. And that's what leads to people emulating people like Andrew Tate and Roosh V. It's because society as an institution tells young men that women like sensitive, like soulful, introverted guys, and then the sensitive, soulful, introverted guys go thinking that if I'm just as nice as I possibly can be to this girl, she will like me. And it turns out that she doesn't want that guy. She wants the douchebag jock dude who challenges her and makes her feel special. And the sensitive introvert guy will notice this and go, okay, what in the fuck am I doing wrong? I was told that they like sensitive guys, but all they do is date the Giga Chads with the douchebag behavior. Moving on.
All right, give me one sec. One sec. Okay. I'm gonna be fully honest. I don't know why anyone would follow Andrew Tate. Like, looking at the guy, he is.
He is a complete and utter moronic bag of dicks.
No, I'm just. You know what? Fuck it. I don't give a shit. He's an ugly motherfucker. I don't know how he would get, like, visually alone, he does not seem that charismatic or anything like that.
Honestly, because he's a former like MMA fighter who blings himself out a lot and tries to like
So he's a tryhard.
Yeah, he rizzes his way past their defenses, basically. It's like I was just
He's a former. You say he's a former MMA fighter.
Yes.
And he looks like that.
Yes.
What, was he in the fucking Little League of MMA?
I don't know. This is just the information about him that I know. He is a former MMA fighter. He converted to Islam because he thinks Christianity is too feminized, which, I mean, there are other options, Andrew, but okay. And because he has money and status and a dude bro attitude, that usually gets him a lot of attention from a lot of extremely vapid bitches. And then he recruits those extremely vapid bitches to be his cam girls, which results in him having more money and influence and status, which rinse and repeat several dozen times.
Okay. The 4-part series follows a family whose lives are blown apart when their 13-year-old son is accused of killing a female classmate. The drama, which was released last week and was the most watched show on Netflix around the world last weekend, which again was in March, shines a light on the corrosive impact on some teenage boys of social media and misogynistic influencers.
Okay, and here's another thing about this whole thing. Why are we acting as though boys are uniquely fucked over by social media when, trust me...
Wasn't there that whole Slenderman murders?
I'd never heard of that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah, a couple, I think a girl, like, some girls thought that Slenderman was coming after them, like young ones, and like one of them killed the other as like a sacrifice or something, if I believe.
Okay, that wasn't quite where my brain was going with the whole we should talk about how women are affected by social media as well, but if you needed a bizarre graphic example of how women are also occasionally fucked over by social media, there is an example. I was gonna go more the OnlyFans route, but okay, fine. There's another example of women also being vulnerable to social media. Because here's the thing. There is some truth to the idea that social media can, like, inflate a personal sense of narcissism, but here's the lack of equivalency here. Because when men do things online, nobody has a problem demonizing everything from pickup artists to uh, MGTOWs to MRAs, etc., or even anti-feminism. But almost no one points out how easily women can be drawn into narcissism because of either a mixture of feminism or traditionalist gynocentrism, or just the OnlyFans thought lifestyle. There are so many extremely narcissistic girls who think that the most important thing about them is not what they do, but that they are women. And so they try to look as hot and as much like a thought as possible. But we're not allowed to call that vapid or it's just like I was saying earlier with we demonize the shit out of the manosphere, but we never bring up the ideological warping of intersectional feminism. Well, in a similar vein, anytime a man even looks like he might be deriving confidence from people like Andrew Tate or MGTOW or PUAs in general, etc., we are we outcry that in like 5 seconds. But we're not allowed to talk about how a lot of women are bubbled into their sense of narcissism, because as far as our society is concerned, women should be thinking about themselves all the time because women are so victimized and vulnerable all the time, don't you know? To the point that they will straight up abuse the men in their lives, thinking that they can't abuse anyone because nobody told them, oh, by the way, all this shit about don't abuse people, it applies to you as well, ladies. Anyway, moving on.
Right. Yep. Okay. Uh. Sorry. Work is killing me. So.
Yep.
Bridget Phillipson, the education secretary, has been under pressure to overturn the draft relation and sex education guidance put forward by the previous conservative government, which included plans to ban sex education for children under the age of 9 and discussion of gender identity. Okay, to be fair, okay,
Go ahead.
this is UK, right?
Yes.
Okay, I can understand age of 9 just simply because that's not when puberty hits for boys, mind you.
Yeah.
Like that,
Nobody should be sexually educated at the age of 9 because they haven't gone through puberty yet.
yeah. That's
When I was in school, we got sex ed and health class, like, in the same year we got like driver's ed.
it's weird. Like we actually no, did we have? We don't have health. We didn't have health when I was going through school.
What? Oh, like, I know I'm from Pennsylvania and I'm 4 years ahead of you, and you're in Indiana in the inner city and you're 4 years after me. But what in the actual fuck were they teaching you guys? Because it really just felt
Nothing,
it feels like they went out of their way to educate you about the least amount of shit possible.
dude. It's honestly, yeah. I don't remember a damn thing. Granted, it's been 8 years since I graduated, or no, what? It
If you graduated in like 2009, it's been like 7 years, I think, or
you mean
2019. Sorry, but yeah.
2018?
Okay, so that would be yeah, 8 years.
Well, no, wouldn't it be 7? Because 2018, 2028 would be 10 years from my graduation.
Okay, uh, 18 to 20 is 2 years, and then another 5 would be
7.
2025. So So yeah, next year will be the tenth anniversary of your graduation,
No,
and
it
I
would
should
no, it would be 8 years.
okay, but in
2018. How, do you not know math?
sorry, my brain had a derp moment. But in any case, you're like we always make jokes about how stupid the American educational system is, but
I think
yours in particular seemed real like dystopian from the outside looking in.
again, I don't remember a damn thing they taught us because it was not. I can't
Yeah,
remember it. Like
that part's normal. I don't remember hardly anything I learned in school either, but that's because
that's fair.
most of the stuff that I learned was stuff I learned on my own time because it was
Yeah,
more
that's fair.
interesting than the shit they were teaching.
I think one time when we were in 5th grade, we had like a health and wellness. Like it was a special thing. It wasn't a class or anything. It was like people came in and stuff.
Okay, the American educational system, ladies and gentlemen. But in any case, I
Holy
would
shit!
agree with.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, it's okay. It is regarding to this, like under the age of 9 is like, 5th grade. Uh, I was 5 and
I think I was like 10 or 11 in fifth grade, if I'm remembering correctly.
yeah, no, because I turned 14 in 2014, which is when I was started to go to high school. So
Okay,
uh,
so
tracked 4 years, so I would have been 10.
yeah,
That was one time. It's one time in that place.
yeah, American educational system, ladies and gentlemen. But I, I understand things are a bit different over there in the UK. But why were you subjecting 9-year-olds to sexual education? Because again, typically you start sex ed around the time most people will already be going through puberty, so that they don't end up knocking each other up in their in the throes of their hormones going nuts and shit. Like that's when I remember our health class being like there was a health class in ninth grade that was just like general sort of pseudo biology stuff, and then a couple of years later there was driver's ed, which was also kind of a sex ed as well, from what I remember. Um, it was like half the year was driver's ed, the other half of the year was sex ed and stuff. Which that makes sense because by the time people are like 15, 16, pretty much everyone who's going to go through puberty at a reasonable time scale has, and they're all, because teenagers are horny bastards, at least thinking about sex, if not necessarily having it yet. Um, being that as it may, yeah, why are you subjecting 9-year-olds to sex ed? Because let me put it this way: if 9-year-olds are having to worry about sex ed, people should either be in jail or under the jail as a result of it. Like like that's when you get into the oh that's amusing, please face the wall now territory. Children of the age of 9 should not be. I'm not saying they should be ignorant of what sex is, because I think that would be going too much in the other extreme. But the they shouldn't need sex ed for practical reasons. And if you're trying to teach kids at the age of 9 about sex, I'm gonna have to confiscate your hard drive for the good of humanity. And depending on what I find there, it will either be a you need to be in jail or you need to be under the jail conversation. Moving on.
All right. Although Labor's new guidance is still a work in progress. It is expected to include additional content to support healthy relationships, which will enable schools to tackle harmful behavior and ensure that misogyny is stamped out and not allowed to proliferate, according to one source familiar with the proposals.
Okay, well, misogyny is ridiculously rare. Are you also going to subject young girls to a "here's why you shouldn't hate boys on sight" lecture? Because here's my egalitarian way of thinking. Either subject both genders to this bullshit, if preventing gendered hatred is so important to you, or don't subject either of them to it because both misogyny and misandry are relatively rare. I would argue that misandry is actually slightly more common than misogyny because every institution and its mother has gotten befucked by exceedingly gynocentric intersectional feminist talking points, basically from the word go. But if you're going to have lectures about don't hate the other gender, you might want to explain to young girls they shouldn't hate boys on sight either. And no, I'm sorry, but girls are weaker than boys, so boys have a bigger responsibility isn't gonna fly with me because we don't live in the Stone Age anymore. There are weapons that equalize the strength barrier. There are institutions that equalize the strength barrier. And more importantly, there is cultural sentiment that equalizes the strength barrier. Because from the age of like toddler, we tell boys, don't hit girls. In a sane world, we would be telling them, don't hit anyone. But we are explicitly taught from the time we are toddlers, don't hit girls under any circumstances, which is half of a good thing because you shouldn't be hitting anyone. Why we find it okay to go, oh, we're not even going to mention don't hit boys either because that's just going to be how it is. Um, but yeah, from an early age, boys are taught don't hit girls under any circumstance. And girls are taught if a boy does anything mean to you, come and tell somebody. Frankly, it would be nice if we could just occasionally tell girls, don't be deliberately manipulative or mean to boys either. But that apparently makes me a radical for pointing out that if you don't want people to be violent, tell them don't hit anyone. Don't just tell them don't hit girls. Because that leaves open the possibility that boys can hit boys and nobody fucking bats an eye. That's how you get so much bullying. Because we're taught don't hit girls, and then when boys hit boys, we're at best taught don't fight, but we're not taught we shouldn't hit anyone, which is pathological and stupid as far as I'm concerned. Moving on.
Alright. One sec. One sec. Ah. Starting in primary school, children will be encouraged to build skills that allow them to express and understand boundaries, handle disappointment, and pay attention to the needs and preferences of oneself and others. At secondary school, they will explore communication and ethics within romantic and sexual relationships. Okay.
You're teaching 9-year-olds about romance and sexual. Like,
Well, it says secondary school. I don't know if that's because they have a weird system of that. They don't have high schools and stuff.
Yeah, primary school is like grade school for us. Secondary school is like high school for us.
So that actually works.
Yeah, that's at least more sane than the alternative. Although I will once again point out, you might want to also let little girls know that they're not entitled to everything, because a lot of girls, especially in the modern day, are entitled and narcissistic as shit. And all of this women were historically oppressed, therefore they deserve more rights than men thing is doing nothing but making that narcissism worse. because this is the cultural blind spot we have. We have a system where boys are taught don't hit girls, and girls are not really taught shit. Other than if they're in like a feminist culture, women used to be oppressed, therefore you get to request more things than the other gender does because we're trying to make it historically even or some shit. And again, try telling me that there isn't a problem with young girls being extremely self-centered and narcissistic, and I will laugh in your fucking face. Because there are so many girls who will act like they have been like beaten senselessly simply by being told no. There are also rich boys who sometimes get some version of that as well. But trust me when I tell you, girls learn from an early age that throwing tantrums and crying will get them just about anything they want, a lot of the time. Obviously, not always, and there are, individuals are individuals. But we are a lot softer on women's sense of entitlement or sense of victimhood than we are on boys. We start from an early age telling them not to be entitled from anything when it comes to boys, and young girls are basically just kind of assumed that they're morally perfect by default, so we don't really have to teach them not to be self-centered and entitled, which would explain why there are so many girls in their early 20s who are the very soul of narcissism incarnate. Moving on.
The guidance will also encourage young people to think about what healthy sexual relationships involve, including and adding to consent, including kindness, attention, and care. So basic shit.
Yeah, like, this is the thing. I did just go on a diatribe about blind spots when we culturally teach kids things and stuff, but like going the whole other way and assuming that people don't know what things like consent and boundaries are basically just assumes that people are evil by definition. And this is the like core of this. You pathologize things which are normal, and then you treat as outstanding moral virtues things that are common sense. What that essentially teaches people is that people are evil by definition and that you have to make them good rather than just assuming that they will be good in broad strokes. Which I would argue is an even bigger problem, because if you tell people that like consent is this outstanding moral virtue, not something that's common sense, anyone for whom that is common sense will start to get an inflated ego, and anyone for whom that isn't common sense will probably struggle to grasp the concept to begin with. And what that will wind up with is people assuming other people are like animalistic monsters when they aren't, and people assuming that their fellow people need to be repeatedly told obvious shit. Ironically, the only people who aren't really going to have a problem with this are the very people who will probably also be prematurely demonized by other people. It's like, if I told you that every person grows up to potentially be a murderer, would that help the situation, or would it make people extremely paranoid about murder? And therefore be extremely hypersensitive around other people? Because that's what this essentially does. By saying, we have to explicitly tell you not to do this, you're treating it as though it's something they couldn't have figured out on their own, which is just going to make people extremely paranoid about everyone else in the room. And paranoia is going to result in moral hysteria, and moral hysteria is going to result in a lot more crimes happening for no good goddamn reason. Because people, when they're afraid, are oh shit.
And it looks like
I don't know what happened. StreamYard had a momentary shit fit. But yeah, people are a lot more
hold on.
prone to.
Did
Go ahead.
I did not. I think you were speaking, but I didn't hear you for a second there.
StreamYard threw a hissy fit.
Okay.
But back to what I was saying. People are far more likely to react in an extreme way if they're like paranoid or hysterical about something. Typically, what you want to do to get people to calm the fuck down is treat people like they're normal, and they will usually behave normal. And then you can correct anyone that is slow on the uptake. By treating something as as a bigger problem than it is, you're just going to make people paranoid, and paranoid people have a tendency to overreact. Moving on.
Okay. Content taught to older children reflect the real-life complexities of romantic and sexual relationships. Source added, this will include the significance of power, vulnerability, and how to manage difficult emotions that can relate to relationships, including disappointment or anger, as well as the influence of online misogynistic content and the impact of pornography on sexual behavior, including what young people perceive as normal.
Okay, again, here we go with you demonizing something that barely even exists and treating it as if there's a demon hiding under every rock. Like, most people, BDSM notwithstanding, don't process sex as a power dynamic. And even the ones that people do have, like top and bottom or dom submissive, tend to be a lot more wholesome and not pathological than most people give them credit for. It's this idea that there is a underlying misogyny problem. It's like with the people who call everything fascist. By broadening the definition of fascism to such a degree that everything is grouped under the heading of fascism, all you're doing is making people irrationally afraid and hysterical about a problem that is actually vanishingly rare. Same thing with misogyny. There are very, very few honestly misogynistic people out there in the world. But by treating this problem like it is like millions of times more likely than it actually is, all you're doing is making it more likely that people will snap under pressure, and therefore there will actually be more misogynists in the world than there otherwise would be. It's like when you presuppose there to be a problem, you make people paranoid about that problem. And if that problem is also rare, you're probably going to make them start seeing things that aren't that thing as that thing because their minds are already prematurely looking for it. And when you call things dangerous when they're not, you make it a civilization where people have to constantly walk on eggshells and be hypervigilant. And people who have to walk on eggshells all the time and be hypervigilant are or tend to be more emotionally on edge, and people who are more emotionally on edge tend to have emotional breakdowns more than they should. And what does a world in which everyone is potentially prone to emotional breakdowns do? Simple. It makes people go nuts a lot easier, and when people go nuts a lot easier, they tend to do dangerous shit. It's the very definition of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're taking something that is exceedingly rare and extremely pathological and telling everyone, "Oh, hey guys, there's one of these hiding under a rock. Don't forget to be vigilant." And when people are overly and disproportionately vigilant, that's when you get into the witch hunting type territory. Moving on.
All right. New guidance will be seen as the first victory for the co-writers of Adolescence, Jack Thorne and actor Stephen Graham, who also stars in it as the teenager's father, who wanted it to be a show that causes discussion and makes changes. The show's executive producer is the Hollywood star Brad Pitt.
Well, congratulations, you guys. All you did was make two-dimensional propaganda that doesn't actually do anything but make the problem worse. Moving on.
Last week, the parents of one of the survivors of the Southport knife attack praised adolescents for exploring the issue of misogynistic radicalization. Their daughter, known as Child A, was stabbed more than 30 times by Axel Rudukbana, then 17, in an attack during a Taylor Swift-themed dance class at the beginning of the summer holidays in July. 3 young girls were killed.
Okay, here's something. I'm gonna drop something in here, and I think it's important that we remember. For one thing, Axel Rudukbana, I believe, was a Muslim, and he was also black. But in adolescence, Jamie is portrayed as being a white boy. So instead of focusing on problems maybe with Islam, or problems maybe with like cultural assimilation into a different society, they race flipped him and got rid of the Muslim thing entirely, and are now blaming all white boys essentially by proxy
What are you
for
talking about? Hold on, wait, what are you talking about?
the Axel Rudukbana, the guy, the story that this
No, it's not.
adolescent is based on
It's
was
not. It's not based off it.
Yeah, it did. They did.
No, it's not based off.
The writers of Adolescence gave 3 separate examples, and something that they all had in common was the 3 separate examples that they based the story of Adolescence on were examples of Muslim guys going on stabbing sprees. But in the fictionalized version of Adolescence, Jamie's a white boy. Because apparently Britain would rather believe that their own homegrown Englishmen are likely to go on stabbing sprees than believe that Muslims are sometimes a little bit crazy. Moving on.
Okay. In a statement read out by their local MP in a Commons debate on knife crime on Thursday, the parents said that teenage boys need to be protected from the terrifying impact of Tate. Rudukbana wiped much of his internet search history before the attack. It is unknown whether he ever viewed material linked to the misogynistic influencer. A Cambridge Crown Court heard earlier this month that the triple murderer Kyle Clifford had viewed Tate's videos before shooting his ex-girlfriend Louise Hunt and his sister Hannah with a crossbow and stabbing their mother, Carol.
Now, that strikes me as something like he was probably abused by his family, not a problem with all boys or all men everywhere. But this is the lesson that they're taking from stories like this. Instead of, maybe we should care about boys' mental health, maybe we should stop demonizing them, maybe we should believe them when they talk about being abused, even if it's by a woman, and or maybe we should be somewhat skeptical of extremely hardcore Muslims in a Western country. But no, they can't talk about how Axel Rudy Cabana was a Muslim and a migrant, because that might make it sound like Islam is somehow to blame. So instead, they're going to blame Andrew Tate, even though, as they just said, there's no evidence that he ever viewed Andrew Tate, and there is evidence of him being an extremely theocratic Muslim. So there's that. It's not as if that added context would have made a difference or anything, right, guys? No, it's not crazy third world theocracies that are the issue, or uh, migrating people into a country they're not assimilated to that's the issue. It's they're men, and that somehow makes all men to blame for the actions of this one dude, because we say so. Moving on.
Last year, teachers were told to look out for signs of incel culture in the classroom, as the education secretary warned that manosphere influencers were radicalizing teenage boys into hating women. Guidance was issued by the government telling teachers of pupils aged over 14 that they needed to be on the lookout for signs that boys were being drawn into aggressive misogyny that could lead to violence, suicide, and sexual abuse.
Okay. Are we ever going to talk about how many women are probably radicalized into intersectional feminism by all of the institutions? And here's the other thing. Much as I wish the manosphere was slightly larger, because I do think the world would be a better place if more people knew about men's issues, the manosphere is actually very small, and it has very little impact when you compare it to things like every corporation and government organization having diversity, equity, and inclusion and ESG requirements. I can't speak today. But we can't talk about how telling young girls from an early age that women are oppressed by men and the patriarchy and everything else might radicalize them into any amount of misandry. We have to talk about how, oh, someone might have seen an Andrew Tate video once, and that's why they went on a stabbing spree. Derp. Moving on.
Okay. Incels are involuntarily celibate heterosexual men and boys who blame women for the fact they cannot find a romantic or sexual partner. Mainly online subculture holds that they are victims of female autonomy. Women who no longer need men for physical and financial security are then free to choose attractive partners.
Okay, no. What's going on there is boys dealing with the fact that a lot of women hate men. A lot of people in general, men and women included, see men as valuable only for what they do or what they have, and never for what they are. And there's the issue that women in general want a high achieving partner. And so, rather than ignore this fact to their detriment, a lot of these incels and PUAs and such try to be the thing that women want, the type of person who gets attention from women. But rather than see that as a positive thing, because that means men are trying to please women, a lot of gynocentrists and especially intersectional feminists will say that men trying to become the person women want is their attempt to manipulate them. Also, given the advent of social media and online dating, a lot of women have a larger pool of potential men to choose from than they ever did, and that results in a bottleneck scenario where women want the most high achieving man they can get, the high value male. And as a result, it's 80% of women ignoring 80% of men and only considering valid that 20% of men who are high achieving enough to get her jimmies rustled, so to speak.
Moving on.
Moving on.
All right. Last week at the BBC's annual Richard Dimby lecture, Sir Gareth Southgate, former England football manager, attacked the toxic effects of social media and called for young men to be taught belief and resilience. Okay, that's on you, motherfuckers. That's not.
I'm gonna borrow a phrase from Christopher Hitchens that I got when I first heard it on a Dr. Random Account video. This is the epitome of you create people sick and then you command them to be well. You are literally inverting the problem because you would rather believe that there are dangerous, toxic, demonic misogynists around every corner than believe that men are vulnerable or have valid issues in society or in relation to their relationship with women, goddammit. Moving along.
Rather than turning to teachers, sports coaches, or other positive role models, many boys now find guidance online. These are callous, manipulative, and toxic influencers whose sole drive is for their own gain. That's fair.
Okay, and
That's
who's... Go ahead.
no, just that's a fair assumption. That's
Yeah, but here's the thing. The reason why people like Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson or Roosh V or I'm not gonna say the Honey Badgers because the only kind of manosphere they haven't gone out of their way to demonize yet is men's rights. I'm wondering if that's because they don't know that men's rights is even a thing. But the reason why people find people like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson so attractive to them is because those are the only groups of people, the people in the manosphere are the only groups of people who seem to want to offer men and boys a solution to their problems. That now, this doesn't go well because a lot of those solutions are fucked in the head. But do you think these boys find this attractive because they're being manipulated or because no other part of society is addressing their issues? They go to people in their lives and say, I have these issues, or how do I solve these issues? And more often than not, they are told, those issues don't exist, you're being a narcissist, or how dare you even bring up those issues when women have insert every issue they've had since the dawn of time. And only after realizing that no one in their life will be a positive male role model for them will they seek out things online because it's the only set of people who are dealing with their issues. You could resolve this by having society at large be more sympathetic to men's issues, but because of that patriarchy hypothesis from yesteryear thing, the conspiracy theory that men are like controlling the world specifically to oppress or victimize or itemize women, we can't see the idea that men have any vulnerabilities either in general or to women. And how dare you even bring it up, apparently, is usually the excuse. Moving on.
Alright. Southgate said they willingly trick young men into believing that success is measured by money or dominance, that strength means never showing emotion, and that the world, including women, is against them.
Okay, the reason why people like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson give that sort of advice is because that sort of advice actually tends, not perfectly mind you, but it tends to work. Because again, a lot of very sensitive, very introverted, very not traditionally masculine guys are told growing up, women just want you to be a good guy, be as good of a guy as you can. And then after puberty, they proceed a lot of the time on that assumption, but women don't go for the geeky, sensitive, introverted male feminist guys. Very often, they go for people with high status, physical dominance, financial dominance, etc. The incels did not come up with the idea of the Chad or the alpha male. What they did was they realized that by and large, the alpha male Chad types are the types who actually get the attention from women. And so boys who have difficulties getting attention and validation from women strive to become more like the Chad so that they can have results more like the Chad. Whereas in academic and feminist circles, if a boy even says, I was told to be as sensitive and good as I could be, and that would get me attention, and it's not working, how do I fix this? They're told, how dare you even think about fixing this? Don't you know women are not objects? And that is basically the sum and substance of the feminist or gynocentric traditionalist model of if you fail as a man, it's your fault, and you shouldn't view women as objects or try to get validation from them because that victimizes them somehow. We're not told women are not that good. We're in fact told that women are so good that we shouldn't drag them down with our based or animalistic instincts. Fortunately, I happen to be gay, so I've never had this obsession with getting girls as much as this. But for boys who are heterosexual and therefore seek the emotional and sexual validation of the opposite sex, you can understand how disheartening it must be to grow up being told just be as morally good as you can be, and that will get you female attention. Only to realize once you're in high school that the guys who get all the girls are the dominant, aggressive, status having ones, which is the exact opposite of what we were told from childhood. Moving on. Also, hi DT. I just now saw that DT's there.
Oh, DT, I am sorry that we. Okay. Looks like he's gone through like the last 2 hours.
Yep.
I'm not gonna lie, man. I think we are just gonna have to cut the PC Gamer article for next week and just get over with the.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
On to a different kind of stupid.
Alright, it's loading. Just give me a sec. Alright. Okay. This is from Bounty in the Comics. Dalton actually, funnily enough, sent this to me. It's from bountyinthecomics.com, written by Spencer Lee, published April 7.5. DC writer Mark Waid says Superman speaks a lot to a lot of people right now because he offers a symbol of hope at a time of widespread dread.
Mark, I hate to burst your bubble here, but a lot of people are actually feeling more optimistic right now than they have in a while because unlike presumably you, they actually like the current administration. And I'm only bringing up the current administration and stuff because Mark Wade has a history of being extremely partisan and political, especially on Twitter and stuff. And I'm guessing the reason he thinks that these are the darkest times, TM, is because the person he doesn't like got elected. If I'm wrong and he has actual more nuanced reasons for this, then I shall eat the metaphorical crow. But I'm guessing that he thinks people are filled with dread because he thinks that people don't want the person who got a electoral mandate. Well, moving on.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. According to veteran DC scribe Mark Wade, the massive push Superman will be saving this year across various mediums could not have come at a more appropriate time, as he believes the Man of Steel can stand as a significant symbol of hope at a time when the concept is most needed. I mean, to be fair, the world's always kind of been fucked, so I don't know.
Yeah, like I agree with this sentiment because that's exactly what Superman should do. Whether it's actually going to be that way or not is, something we'll have to see about in a couple months here. But I don't think this particular era is any more like in need of hope than any other era. Typically, I would say a symbol of hope in this vein is a good idea in general because nihilism is not your friend. But I'm gonna hazard a guess here that most of Mark Wade's reason for needing a symbol of hope right now is because politics didn't go the way he wanted, and he's angry slash afraid slash hysterical about it. And again, if I'm wrong, I will eat crow, but I don't think I'm wrong. I've seen enough of Mark Wade's rants on Twitter by this point to know roughly where his head is at. I wish he
Right.
weren't that predictable because I'd
Um,
prefer.
1000.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wade, who previously penned such seminal DC tales as Kingdom Come 52 and The Flash Ryan 2, wherein he both created the character of Impulse and elevated Wally West to A-list status, and currently serves as the writer of the ongoing Justice League Unlimited Volume 2 and Batman and Superman World's Finest Volume 1. Offered his take on Superman's modern-day relevance while speaking to Newsarama's George Marston in promotion of the upcoming Summer of Superman publishing initiative.
I mean, good for DC for finally getting synergy together. It stuns me how often um the comics would just ignore whatever the movies are doing when in actuality the movies should be like the largest possible like hype machine for the comics you could conceive of. But good for DC for preemptively like getting the synergy going. Moving on.
All right. Okay. Um, Observing how 2025 is shaping up to be a particularly big year for The Last Son of Krypton, with the heroes set to properly kick off James Gunn's new DCU, and play a starring role in DC's upcoming We Are Yesterday crossover event. Marston at one point asked Wade as to why, in his opinion, Superman was so poised for this big resurgence across the public consciousness. I don't know anything to say that.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
have anything to comment on there either yet.
In turn, the Superman Birthright Volume 1 creator asserted, I think with all the turmoil going on, I think that there is a sense of dread that is an undercurrent of every moment of our lives, even whether we realize it or not. And Superman is always the symbol of hope. Okay?
I think he's trying to talk around it, which fair enough, I suppose, is more subtle than he usually goes, but why do you think there's turmoil in today's day and age, Mark? Because there's a couple things that have nothing to do with politics that could be an explainer there, but I've seen your Twitter often enough to know how politically warped you are, so why do you think people are upset today, Mark? Moving on.
Um, Superman is always the symbol of what we can accomplish if we pull together, what we can do if we have empathy, what we can do if we make kindness a virtue rather than a weakness, and I think that speaks to a lot of people right now. It certainly speaks to me.
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it really that sentiment right there feels like a people who don't agree with me don't have empathy thing that he's saying. I might be reading too much into it, but he seems to think that the only way to be empathetic and kind is to agree with him. And yeah, no, Mark. A, a lot of people are doing what they do because they think it is the right thing to do. The fact that they disagree with you doesn't mean they're wrong, it just means they have a different framework from you. And again, I don't want to put words in his mouth. Maybe he's saying this is a more general statement, but given how the modern day left seems to think that they are the only ones with kindness or empathy, all the while the other side wins because they're more capable of speaking to people than that side is, it's hard not to read that as a we're the only ones with empathy and kindness raw impulse. I could be wrong though, so moving on.
Notably, the way that Wade in particular is looking to emphasize Superman's hopes that biology comes as no surprise, given how, by his own admission, the 2024 re-election of Donald Trump as U.S. president essentially broke him. Even if by some miracle this turns around, I don't believe in the basic goodness of my fellow Americans anymore, and without this, I cannot write superheroes, said Wade on November 5th as vote tallies began to overwhelmingly favor Trump. There's no point when you see a decline in the quality of my work soon. You'll be able to trace it back to this night.
Okay, Mark, I have some level of sympathy for you there, but adults get on with their fucking jobs, regardless of politics, and a lot of adults don't even care that much about politics to begin with. If your ego is so politically fragile that every time the like election apparatus goes a way you don't like, you suddenly start like becoming depressed and panicking, you're being childish there, my friend. You have a very childish and simplistic view of your fellow humans, and you also seem to be completely pig ignorant of why people have any reason to disagree with you. That attitude of people are just evil and voted the wrong way because they're evil is so like childish and myopic. You do know that the people who voted differently from you have morally valid reasons for doing so and don't do it out of either conscious or unconscious evil, right, Mark? Moving on.
Interestingly, Wade is not the only Superman-related creator to offer such a light-in-the-darkness take on the public's current interest in Big Blue's adventures. Asked during a February DCEU press event as to why he thought his upcoming silver screen take on the hero was the right one for the current cultural moment, the aforementioned Gunn explained, I think he's the right Superman because he is a character that stands for something that is solid, stands for basic human morals, basic human integrity, basic belief in protecting others, protecting the weak, being good to people, and being honest. It stands for what I think of as the rules that don't change. People are looking for heroes right now, he added. They're looking for values of goodness, looking for people who are good and decent human beings, and Superman is that.
Okay, but again, I'm trying not to read too much into this here, but you guys don't have a monopoly on how to be a good person, guys. You, your politics are not the only way to be kind or to express kindness or decency. Your automatic, at least like unconscious assumption seems to be that your way is the only way to be good, and that being the opposite of you means being evil by definition, which is frankly a retardedly myopic view of the world. It's literally you're either with me or you're evil, and no. And this is especially ironic when you consider that Superman's version of goodness is not a political version of goodness. Clark explicitly avoids commenting on politics because he knows that the world is both in the abstract and in the literal sense fragile, so he has to be responsible with how he interacts with it. And therefore, usually, Clark does the work that is in front of him rather than the greater good TM. We already covered this in I think last week's article where superheroes fascist thing happened. Superman's definition of goodness tends to be that small acts of goodness and kindness will snowball into larger ones, not the greater good must be served from the top down, which is the utopian political approach. Moving on.
Barring any unforeseen shipping delays, the Summer Superman Special Volume 1, Number 1, as penned by Wade in collaboration with current Superman Volume 6, Joshua Williamson, and the book's next writer, Dan Slott, is set to land on April 16th. Further, that same day, we'll see the start of Wade's We Are Yesterday crossover, which kicks off in Batman Superman World's Finest, Volume 1, Number 38, continues on into Justice League Unlimited, Volume 2, Number 6. The next week, and conclude the week after in the pages of Superman World's Finest 2025 Annual. That's it.
Maybe this is me reading too much into this, but I don't like the title We Are Yesterday. It sounds like an excuse to dump on established characters in favor of the next generation.
Yeah, you are probably reading too much into it.
Probably, but they've done shit like that before, so I can only be metaphorically punched in the face so many times before I'm flinching at vague arm movements. Also, if it turns out to be what that story is about, I reserve the right here and now to say I told you so. Anyway, next.
Sorry, I was just getting ready. So I'm moving on to the trailers.
Yep.
Both, I believe, I submitted.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So this is the official trailer for Tron Ares, the third film in the Tron trilogy. Um, this just came. This came out of complete nowhere. So
Hmm.
I was surprised when I saw this. All right. Well, they don't really eat food like the programs, so just want to go banana.
Digital banana.
Fuck off.
Hey, could have been worse. I could have said NFT banana.
Yeah, that is worse. Okay, banana.
Digital banana.
Unit 12, acknowledging dispatch. Already in pursuit.
So they're finally in the real world, which I think has kind of been what was building up from the first movie in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look bad, actually. It looks pretty good. So I will say the costumes are a little lackluster compared to Legacy. They like seem a little bulkier. Not as
I I actually prefer these designs to the legacy ones. I really didn't. M- Most of the creative decisions they made in Legacy pissed me off or annoyed me. So
go fuck yourself.
I'm happy. I'm happy to see them kind of bringing back the original one a little bit more. Like it seems like this is a much happier medium between the first movie's designs and the second movie's designs.
I disagree, and you can go fuck yourself about Legacy.
I I this is why he had to send it, folks, because I had very little like vested in Tron to begin with, and I really didn't like Legacy. So
I'm
this
a
is
strong.
very much this is
I'm a.
very much Brainstormer's circle of this particular circus.
I'm a beat your ass seriously when we meet. Like,
I am aware. I am making a note of it. It is recorded for posterity.
all right. My issue with the bulky costumes, they look kind of cheaper than the ones in Legacy. And you say anything defamatory about Legacy again, I'm gonna mute you.
I am aware. Um, like I said, I always preferred the first movie's designs, and this seems like a much better realization of that than was in the second one.
Couldn't help
Moving
yourself.
on,
You couldn't help yourself, could you?
but do you that I only have so many ways of explaining this without comparing it negatively to Legacy, because Legacy did a lot of shit I didn't like. Anyway, Digital Banana.
I'm looking for something. Something I do not understand.
I'm I'm really enjoying the like red color scheme here. Um, one of the things that I felt like the previous one missed the mark on was
Hmm.
there there was too much white on black. Focusing on the orange here is a lot better, I think.
Shut the fuck up.
You know I don't like the second one.
I know.
There's
Still shut the fuck up.
There's only so many ways I can compliment this one without referencing how it is an improvement over the previous one.
Or you can just talk about this one without comparing it.
It's the third movie in a trilogy, my dude. How in the fuck is that supposed to work?
It's removed by about a decade.
Uh-huh. And
Shut the
what
fuck
am
up.
what am I supposed to do with that if not compare it to the previous two movies in the franchise? The first one I liked a lot, the second one I hated a lot.
Shut the fuck up.
No comment. Banana.
Ready? Because there's no going back.
I'm excited.
I am, as of this trailer, cautiously optimistic.
That's as much as I can expect out of you.
You know where I stand on this franchise.
No, it's not that. It's just like that's your basic answer for whenever we watch anything.
Is whether I am cautiously optimistic or bracing myself for disappointment.
Yes. There's
That does-
no in between.
That does tend to be how these things work. Either I am cautiously optimistic and will either be disappointed or validated when that optimism is either confirmed or denied, or I am bracing myself for the disappointment by pointing out preemptively the possible problems. This trailer was far more on the things I have to look forward to side of the scale rather than the things I have to brace myself for them fucking up side of the scale. So, hooray for cautious optimism. They appear to have learned from the issues I had with the second one. I would have said mistakes, but Brainstorm would have punched me if I had gone so far as to call them mistakes.
Still go fuck yourself.
Like I say, I'm optimistic about this one because it seems like they've improved. So, hooray for improving. It also seems like they've given the appropriate amount of time for the VFX to render, which unfortunately is a positive in today's day and age. It shouldn't. It should be the bare minimum, but there are so many things that do not bother to finish letting things render. And
Yeah, how long has that been? Like a decade that they've basically done that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd say maybe like 5-6 years.
Yeah, because it didn't used to be this way. Like, because like Guardians 1 was rendered fine. I think probably like more like 5 to 7 years is when they started getting so overtly lazy. So yeah, it shouldn't be a positive that they actually let things finish rendering, but they did. So I will take the positives where I can get them. Speaking of, on to librarians.
I was gonna build it up. God damn it. Yeah, so I saw this because that actually kind of surprised me because we only covered it like 2 weeks ago or a week ago, maybe.
Yeah, and they're already releasing the second trailer. Good for them.
Well, it launches on May 25th, so
Okay,
yeah,
so this is fairly very soon we will be getting more librarians content.
when we covered the first trailer or teaser or whatever, it was already like a week or so after it was released, and we only found out about it a few days after, like a few days before the podcast. So,
So yeah, that would explain things. Anyway,
but this one
on
came
to-
out. This one came out on Thursday, I believe, 2 days ago. So
So on with the librarians.
yeah, Librarians next chapter. Right.
Banana.
Trying to think.
Actually, fuck it, Golden Apple, because there was the episode with
Yeah.
Eros's apple in Librarians.
Well, I was gonna say Apple at Discord, but okay, Golden Apple.
But yeah, Apple of Discord.
There is no such thing as lost souls, demons, or magic.
Lies, and further lies.
You sure about that? This is the library. Our sole mission is to protect powerful magical objects from getting in the hands of evil men. So cool.
I mean, that might be overstating it just a little bit, because getting them out of the hands of evil men is only like a secondary mission. As I recall it in the previous Librarians cycle there, magic was dangerous whether it was in the hands of people who were good or evil, because magic will fuck you up if you don't know what you're doing, and most people don't know what they're doing.
To be fair,
And
he's
even-
from. Okay, hold on. The guy who's saying this is a librarian from, like, I believe, the 15th or 16th century.
Okay,
No, the 18th. It might actually be the 18th or 19th century. I might.
Okay, but in either case, it does seem like it's slightly oversimplifying what the librarians do, but it might just be a trailer line, so I'm not gonna be that pedantic. I will be pedantic about shit that's actually substantive, but I will not be that pedantic about that, because it may just be the trailer.
You're always pedantic. Don't lie to yourself.
Is what I do. Anyway, Apple of Discord.
Mission is to protect powerful magical objects from getting in the hands of evil men. So cool. You cannot comprehend the danger we are all in.
So we're just gonna wait here for a creature compelled to kill us? Good. No, I just wanted to lock that plan down.
My mind is superior to yours.
Oh my god, he's you.
Well, in his defense, he does come from a period where there is only one librarian, and yes, I'm going to side with him here. The standards of what qualifies as a librarian were higher when there's only one of them. Also, it must be said that in the 19th century, the educated class was far more erudite than in the 2020s, so there's that.
No, I was just the boasting about how big your brain is.
Okay, one, have I ever not been able to back it up? Two, usually I don't actually boast. I simply take other people's compliments. So there.
Don, are you not an arrogant son of a bitch?
No, I am, but let's accurately represent my arrogance, please.
I'm just saying. That feels like a line you would say.
No, it actually doesn't. Because I don't usually talk myself up that much. more often than not, I usually wind up pointing out how pedantic I am in a self-deprecating way. So there. As long as we're
Okay,
going for accuracy here.
okay. At the very least, can you agree that you have the same smarmy, I know it all tone with the way he said it?
I mean, yes, fair enough, I suppose. But also, I don't usually brag quite that much.
It also feels like this guy's got a bit of a god complex, which, again,
Considering how often I chastise other creatives and other writers for playing God when they shouldn't, I do
okay, let me
feel like
clarify the god.
that's slightly
Hold on.
okay.
Hold on. Let me clarify the god complex in terms of this definition in this context.
Please.
How often do you constantly say, if a friend or someone you care about is to get into the world, you are going full Castlevania Dracula?
Regularly, but that's more of me trying to be protective of my friends and me not having a very high opinion of the world.
Also, again, you are
less a
how often on
let less a god complex and more a the world sucks and deserves it complex, I guess would be a better way of putting it.
fair enough, but also how often are you teetering on the edge of supervillainy if I'm not there to reel you back?
Well, yes, that happens in general, but I'm not sure it has anything to do with a god complex. More just a me accurately
Okay,
describing my feelings towards fuck morality.
Megalomania.
I'm not sure. I don't usually have schemes that reach out quite that far. It's not for any particular moral reason or anything. It's just usually I'm more conservative with my schemes.
Still possibly supervillain.
Well, yes, but again, that has less to do with a god complex and more to do with fuck morality entirely.
Okay, I retract my statement about a god complex. But you are basically a crazy mad wizard.
This is true. This is fair enough.
Anyway,
Anyway,
Apple Discord.
yeah. Apple of Discord.
This is so dangerous. Fun. It's so dangerous.
There's a magical library. Now I have video footage.
We have to protect the rest of the world from magic.
We offer you a chance to save the world. Are you in? The librarians.
Okay, now because I am prone to being a pedantic motherfucker, I must ask the question: where are Finn? Where are Finn, Cassandra, Eve, and
Ezekiel.
yeah, like it seems to just be Stone at the moment, which I guess, but I hope we get more of Finn as the OG librarian and Eve as the like quintessential guardian, and I really don't want them to nix Cassandra because like Stone and I vibe on the like art and history pedantry shit, but where it comes to like the technical side of magic, I'm more aligned with Cassandra. Also, because he is canonically immortal in setting, I must ask this question. Where in the fuck is Jenkins, aka Galahad, aka Galeas? I needs Master Galahad wearing a bow tie, because bow tie representation, goddammit. Also, he's probably the best character in the show. So there. we already lost Judson and Charlene because that was the whole premise of the first show. But like, Galahad is technically immortal in setting, so I need at least an excuse as to where he's gone. Like, first episode, that is my first question. Where in the fuck is Jenkins? Secondary to that is where the fuck is everyone else in the extended cast?
Mm.
Anyway, app I love Discord.
Two-night premiere event starting May 25th on TNT.
Okay, that's cool. We're getting a double premiere. I mean, I probably would have preferred just a 2-episode pilot, but like kind of like they did with the first one, with the first show. But I will take a 2-night premiere because let's be real, terrestrial TV hasn't had like big premieres in a very, very long time. So I'm glad that TNT realizes that the Librarian franchise is special.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. Shit, you are joining kind of at a bad time, Zarya. We're about to actually.
Yeah, we just did the night's last topic. Sorry.
Yeah.
Feel free to come back next Saturday at 8:30 though, because we do this every week.
Yeah.
We do geek news and politics roundup stuff. And feel free to find your way over to the live tab and catch up on some of our older stuff if you want to, because there's 6 years and some change there at this point. We haven't really missed a week, and I think we've only missed a week once, and not to even mention the time back before YouTube Hangout switched over to StreamYard, so we had to restrict the number of episodes we did a week. There was about a 6-month period there where we were doing like 3 episodes a week.
Yeah. So with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
shalom and fuck off.